and I'm grateful. But I just think that God has you in this season for this season, and you don't maximize this season if you're wanting another season. It doesn't do you any good in spring to wish for fall.
Hey there, and welcome to the Global Leadership Podcast. I'm Whitney Putnam, and I'm really glad that you're here. Okay, quick question before we jump in. Have you ever wished you could just sit down with someone who has truly mastered their craft and ask them everything? Like Michael Jordan breaking down how he actually thought about winning, or Mozart explaining where his ideas even came from, or Leonardo da Vinci walking you through how he saw the world so differently than everyone else. I'm not talking about the highlight reel or not the quotes we've all heard 100 times, but the real stuff, the lessons they learned along the way over a lifetime. That's what today's conversation feels like, because today we get to listen to John C Maxwell talk about leadership. And honestly, it's one of those conversations where you just want to lean in a little closer. This isn't about trendy ideas or quick wins. It's about what happens when someone stays curious, humble, and committed to growth for decades. Before we jump in, quick pause. If you're watching on YouTube and you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that button. It's an easy way to stay connected to conversations like this and keep investing in your own leadership. One of the things I love about the Global Leadership Summit is that every year we experience new voices, fresh ideas, and innovative thinking. And genuinely, I love that. But there's also something really special, almost sacred, if I can use that word, about learning from someone who has run their race well and stayed faithful to growth over the long haul. That's what we're stepping into today. John C. Maxwell is a world-renowned leadership expert, best-selling author, and speaker who has shaped leaders across industries and across the globe. He has written more than 80 books, trained millions of leaders, and helped define what modern leadership looks like for so many of us. At the 2025 Global Leadership Summit, John was honored as a GLN Legacy Leader, and he sat down with our president and CEO, David Ashcraft, for a conversation in front of a live studio audience about what a lifetime of leadership really looks like. It's such a gift. All right. Let's get to the conversation.
All right, so how are you doing? Are you holding up with all this emotion that's hitting and attention that you're receiving?
No, not yet. It's just a wonderful thing, and I'm grateful, very, very grateful, very, very.
Well, I hope.
Just understand this. When I started off in ministry, I wasn't as bad as people thought I was, but today I'm not as good as people think I am. And just if you're comfortable with that, I'm very comfortable with that, because as Craig spoke of yesterday, really consistency compounds, and I'm living in the compounding time and receiving things that certainly don't deserve. But anyway, I'm grateful for it, and thank you, and thank GLS for your kindness to me.
Yeah, well, happy to have, you're an easy person to honor, John. So I had mentioned to John, the first time I actually came across John was 1991, I think. And I was just new to our church at LCBC, had 150 people, and I heard about a conference in Philadelphia of breaking the 200 barrier. And so I went to the Breaking 200 Barrier Conference, and John was actually teaching that. And so had opportunity for the very first time to hear John, and then similar to what Craig has said in some environments, began to listen to John all the time, the Enjoy Life Club cassettes that would come out on a monthly basis, different teachings, and so much so that when we would travel on vacation, I have two children, or at that time, they would have been preteens, early teens, and we would take John's cassettes on our trips, and so they grew up listening to you, and whether they appreciate it or not, I don't know. We'll see. I'm sure that they do. So do you have any favorite stories that you like to tell?
Well, don't get me started. I mean, I think stories speak to people probably more than any other way. In fact, today I was on a clock, so didn't take time. But when you talk about legacy, I wanted to, Mark Twain said that he spent a lot of money to find out his family tree, and when he got it, he spent a lot more money to cover it back up. And so, but I love stories. I think stories, principles matter, but stories stick. And so my books are my teaching, a lot of stories.
So I'll tell you a couple of my favorite ones that I still will use from time to time. One is early days, you would always talk about a guy in your church in Hillham, Indiana, and he couldn't sing at all, but apparently he had been doing a lot of singing solos before you came to the church, and he would come to you and tell you that God told him that he should sing a solo.
Yeah. He literally one Sunday, it totally surprised me. They just said, God laid a song on my heart, and so what are you going to do? I'm a 22-year-old kid. They didn't teach me anything in college about how to deal with that. And so I called him up, and he started singing, and I thought, oh my, he's not any good. And I just looked up and God, did you do that? Did you really lay that on his heart? And of course, then it became a weekly habit. God laid a song on my heart. God, and until about the fourth or fifth Sunday, I didn't even want to go to church because it was terrible. I mean, I wanted to tell people God laid a song in his heart, and I'm going to ask him to strike us with deafness for the next 3 minutes so that we don't hear it. And so finally, you get wise after a while. And one Saturday I had a breakthrough. So the next morning when they came in, God's laid a song on my heart. I said, well, I'll tell you what, if God lays it on my heart to call on you, I will. That's when I learned to fight spiritual with spiritual. I looked up at God, and God's going, no. And he never laid it on my heart again.
But part of what you were even teaching with that, John, was excellence. And if I remember right, you would just talk about the fact that, man, if you're going to put somebody like that on the stage, any new person that comes in the church, they think, man.
They look at you and say, what are you doing? They remember this. You may have a family culture, but if they're new to your family, they don't understand it. And you do a lot of weird stuff. And there are times when you have to be a leader, and but it was a great leadership lesson for me, and that is the fact that you can't allow those type of things to continue, or else you're not going to be able to reach all the people you want to reach.
One more I'll just mention to you. You would also talk about this was back in Indiana again, and you said when you first went there, you were trying to bring about change. And at some point you learned that there was one person in the church, one guy that was the influencer in the church. And so you began to focus on him. Yeah,
his name was Claude. And Claude was a farmer. And I went to my first board meeting. I didn't know how to do a board meeting either. Our discipline said I was the chairman of the board, but nobody in college taught me about how to have a board meeting or what chairman of the board meant. I mean, why would college teach you something helpful, practical, weekly, life-changing? And so I told him, Margaret, I said, baby, pray, because I don't know how to have a board meeting. And so I went and opened it up in prayer, and they had 5 members. I mean, it's just a little country church. And I said, well, does anybody have anything on their heart? And Claude said, oh, Pastor, he said, we got several things we need to talk about. And Claude would make the suggestion. I had a guy named Benny right beside him, and Claude would first it, and Benny would second, and everybody would say aye. And I'm just hanging. I mean, they don't even look at me. They don't even recognize me. And finally, Claude looked at me and said, preacher, he said, I think we're done for the evening. He said, you can dismiss in prayer. And I said, well, I think I will. And thank you, Jesus. And I went home to Margaret. She said, how's it go? I said, oh, I got it wired. I only need 2 people, God and Claude. And I said, I have a feeling Claude's going to show up more than God. So he was a farmer. So every week, about 3 or 4 days before the next board meeting, I'd go down to the farm, do the chores with him. I'd give him some thoughts and suggestions. And I'd say, Claude, will you bring that up to the board? I'll take care of that. And literally, I was only there in that little country church for 3 years and 3 months. Not one time did I ever bring up any issue to the board. Claude carried the ball for me the whole time. And that's where I learned that leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. And it was a great lesson for me.
Yeah, fun to hear your stories and think through all of your different stories. So Craig mentioned earlier, and I know for me, you've been a mentor from afar, so many of us would kind of call you a mentor in our lives. Who mentored you? Who would you say are some of the influences in your life?
Well, my father was my greatest mentor. He knew me all his life. And he truly was a great leader. So I grew up in a leadership. So leadership was very easy for me because I just grew up in a leadership culture. Didn't really even understand that until I got out, and some cultures weren't leadership. So he was a great mentor of mine. I had the privilege of John Wooden, who was the great basketball coach at UCLA. He was a mentor of mine. It's a great story. I don't have time to tell you the story now, but he mentored me the last 14 years of his life. And the last thing that he did was write the foreword for my book, Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn. And he went in the hospital, wrote the foreword, and then passed away. I had another mentor named Elmer Towns that literally I would have been 25, and he began to mentor me. And what's incredible is that he's still alive, and he's 93 now, and I still, when I go up to Lynchburg, Virginia, I take him out to lunch and buy his lunch. You always buy your mentor's lunch. You don't let them ever buy anything for you. And I again tell him stories that he taught me and thank him. I want to say just one other thing about mentors, because I've had Jack Hayford. I could give you a list of great men and great women who poured in my life, and most of them now, they're gone. And let me just say this, if you've got a good mentor, just take every moment and maximize it, because you never replace a good mentor. They're not replaceable. They do something for you in a season that no one else can do for you. So take that and value that gift that they give you, because there's going to be a day they're not going to be there. And so I've got a whole teaching on you just don't replace the great mentors, because they were great mentors.
That's good. So you've been through different seasons in your life. You were a pastor, and it's interesting now, probably most younger people don't know you as a pastor. They know you as a business leader. When you stepped away from the church, then there was criticism towards you because people were saying, oh, he's selling out, he's going to the business world. So how did you deal with the criticism that you faced? Did you hear it? I'm sure you had to hear it. And how did you respond to it?
I heard it for several years, thousands of times. The hardest season in my life was crossing over, not because that was hard. It was hard because Christians didn't like it. I made them uncomfortable. I'm a pioneer. People don't understand pioneers because they've never been there themselves. They think you shouldn't be there either. And so I naively thought in my first few months, Dave, that I would explain to them why I was crossing over. And that's when I found out people really don't want explanations from you. They just want you to do what they want you to do. And the best thing I can say to put an end on that statement is, I feel like Nehemiah. I learned to say, I am building a wall and I cannot come down. And I very quickly learned not to take to heart or to take personally the criticism that I got. And I just moved on. And what's amazing is the people that didn't like what I did then now think I'm amazing. So if you're a pioneer, just think of these. In the beginning, they think you're crazy. And then when you pull it off, they think you're amazing. And I found most of the people never have admitted they thought I was crazy. They acted like they were with me the whole time, but trust me, they weren't.
And you know, huh? You know who they were. Yeah.
I know.
So what kept you going all the time as you were being criticized and...
The calling. When my publisher told me that 2/3 of my books were being read by the business secular market, that very moment, that was a surprise to me. I didn't know that. I wasn't writing for that. I was just writing leadership stuff. And the moment he said that, I'm telling you, I'm not talking about a minute later. The moment he said, 2/3 of the business community, they're reading your books, God said, crossover. Crossover. And And I did. Now, it took me a couple years because I was pastoring a big church and we were in a $50 million building program. It took me a couple years to get everything settled for them. There's a right time to leave. But then I crossed over, and it's the greatest decision spiritually and obedience-wise that I feel that I've made, because when I crossed over, it gave me an opportunity to now hang with secular community, and that's my world. My world right now is lost people. This is very rare for me to be in this kind of an. In fact, I'll leave here in a moment, jump on my plane, and tonight I'll be speaking probably the largest insurance company in Canada, and so my world is basically in a secular world. But when Craig mentioned that we've led 3 million people to Christ, and by the way, that's 3 million people to Christ in the last 6 years. And this year, and this year we will lead 1.4 million people to Christ this year. We're scaling it up. That 170 or 90 some 95,000 small groups we have around the world, they're all evangelism groups in a program called Beyond Success. You can look it up. I can't think. You can look it up. I think they can even get it, can't they, or not? Go MaxwellLeadershipFoundation.org. If you go to MaxwellLeadershipFoundation.org, you can look up how we do it in the business community, and see. You see, can you tell I have no clue? I have no clue. I really. That's why I get my team around me. If you knew how little I knew, you probably wouldn't be here today. You'd just say, let's go somewhere else. But we have now. We'll lead 1.3, 1.4 this year to Christ million. But we're probably the number one evangelistic organization in the world. And we can win a person for Christ for $5. Don't even go and ask yourself how much does it cost a church to do that. For $5, we win somebody to Christ.
Tell how you do that. So just to help them understand, when you're in a business environment, are you instantly talking about Jesus? Or how do you do that?
No. You help them. You help them where, listen, don't try to share your faith until you added value to people. Because you've got to get respect from people before you can have a relationship from them. So we just work hard at helping these businesses be very successful. I was at Ashley Furniture before I was there with the top, 500, 700 leaders in that, multi-billion-dollar company. And the reason I'm there is because I'm helping them build a great company. And I mentor Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta. We've done Microsoft. We do the big boys. We do the little ones. It doesn't really matter, but we just add value to people. Once we get their respect, now we get their relationship. And the moment we get their relationship, now we can start introducing faith into the picture. And so we do a small group. Beyond Success is for lost people. And it's 5 things you need to do to be successful in your life, with a little video that I teach with a workbook. And after I do the 5th thing, I share with them, there's another thing I would like to share with you, but it's about my faith. And I would never do that to you without your permission. And so therefore, if you want to hear me do that, you can come back to the next session, They come back to the next session. I share my faith. The 4 pictures of God is what I teach. And over 90% come back, don't they, Mark? And 52% receive Christ. So you have to understand, all this evangelism that when we crossed 3 million yesterday, all this evangelism is not. I'm not there. I mean, it's scalable. It's working through business communities, and it's totally. So if you want to know more about it, you can look about it. I wish I could share with you the wisdom God has given me, how to effectively share my faith with the lost community. And people say, how can you win millions of people to Christ? It's very simple. I don't hang around with Christians. In case you don't understand, you get eternity with Christians. I got a thought for you. Get to lost people. Become salt and light. Get out of your comfort zone. When you cross over, so, my greatest dilemma when I go to heaven is I'm going to have to spend eternity with Christians. Don't we ever get a break? Don't you sometimes just want to, I'm having fun.
Hey everybody, this is Eric, content producer for the Global Leadership Podcast. Listen, I want to talk to you. If you are leading in a church or an organization, I know that one of the things you're always trying to think about is how do I develop more leaders? How do I get more leaders to come on board with my mission, with my vision that I'm pursuing? And I want to tell you about a great tool that the Global Leadership Network has. Team 365 is the system that helps churches and organizations just like yours build and sustain a thriving leadership culture all year, one focused, doable step at a time. And I want to let you know that this is not just a library of great content. It is a culture engine that turns content into repeatable rhythms. If you want a great tool for developing a leadership culture in your organization, go to our website at globalleadership.org. There's a page there called the Leader Resources page. Click on that and you can find out more information on Team 365. And with that, let's get back to our episode.
So you've been through several different seasons. You're a pastor in Ohio. You're a pastor in pastor in Indiana, pastor in San Diego. Equip you were leading. Now you're doing Beyond Success. Is there a stage of life that was the most exciting for you, or that you enjoyed the most?
The stage I'm in now. When people ask me that question, my answer is always the same. Wherever I was at that time was the most fulfilling of my life. I don't mean this unkindly. A lot of people, they say, if I could become really successful, I think I could get happy. Let me explain to you. If you can't get happy where you are, you can't get happy where you're going. And there are people got destination disease and someone's sickness, and they're always trying to think somebody's going to make my day for me. And it's so interesting. When I was in Hillham with Claude and, my little board and the three people the first Sunday. First Sunday, I only had three people in church, and two of them were Margaret and me. Okay, so get the pay. So, I was as fulfilled then as I am right now, and I'm extremely fulfilled, and I'm grateful. But I just think that God has you in this season for this season, and you don't maximize this season if you're wanting another season. It doesn't do you any good in spring to wish for fall. You're in spring. So where are you now? Just get in the game right now. And so I'm very happy. I'm 78. I'm loving my life and enjoying it. And I've got 14 more books to write that I haven't written that are in the book line. I was talking to God the other day, and I said, I'm not trying to negotiate, but you got to let me hang. I'm not done. I got some more books to write, and God just laughs at me all the time. I just crack him up. He just kind of sometimes says, I had no idea when I created you. Anyway.
So as you look back at those seasons, anything you wish you could do differently?
A lot of things. I think there are a lot of things that when we go back, we say, I wish I could have done that better. Just think of parenting. If that isn't the most humbling thing in the world, you can look at your kids and say, well, I wish I would have done this better with them. So, yes, there are a lot of things I wish I would have done better, but I did my best. And my best was not always adequate, but I did my best. And so I learned lessons from those failures, we learn lessons from our losses. I was having an interesting conversation with a man who has a major many billions of dollars of empire. And he was talking very candidly with me one day about losses and failures and mistakes he's made. And I asked him, I said, would you like to go back and do some of them over? And his answer was phenomenal. He looked at me and said, no. I said, you're going to have to explain that. He said, I had a lot of misses. I had some failures. I had some hiccups. But I don't want to do any of them over. Why don't you want to go back and do them over? Two things. First of all, he said, the lessons I learned from my failures were greater than the lessons I've learned from my successes. And if I went back and did them over, I'd lose the lessons. And I refuse to lose the lessons because that's made me the person I am today. And then he said, if I had to go back and do them over, he said, every failure taught me character. Every failure taught me inner emotional resilience. And honestly, he said, it's like this. if I went and did them over, I would lose my character and I'd lose my lessons. He said, no, I'll take the failures and keep the lessons and build the character. And I thought, that's a good answer. And that's how I feel. So yes, did I do it right? No, not always. Did it my best, but you're young and you're human, and we just don't always doesn't work out right. But if we learn our lessons and develop character out of them, then whatever those shortcomings were, Dave, honestly, make us better, or at least have made me better.
Yeah, good. So how has your leadership changed over the years?
Well, when I was a young leader, I was too directional. I've always had security. I've always had confidence, and I've always had clarity. I'm not taking credit for it. I've always been clear. I've always been secure. I've had a sense of confidence with me. But because I had that as a very young leader, by the time I was 28, I had the 10th largest church in America. Then at my second church, when I was in my 30s, with the 6th largest church in America. So I always knew how to lead. Leadership's never been difficult for me. And so there's a whole bunch of, but when I was a young leader, because I was so certain and so clear, I was a directional leader. And I would just basically say, here's where we're going. That's the mountain. Get on the train. Let's go. You with me? And I didn't ask enough questions. And what's changed about me is where I used to give direction without finding out where the people are. Now I ask questions because I found out that you have to find them before you can lead them. And if you can find them, you can lead them really well. So a lot of times in my early days, I led by assumption. I assumed I knew what they wanted. And when you lead by assumption, Dave, there's just a lot of misses in your life. So, there have been many. When I started off as a leader, you had to see more than others see. We've got 50 plus years of doing leadership. Somebody asked me the other day, said, how did you become the number one leadership guru in the world? I said, that's very simple. The rest of them died. It's not complicated. Another one bites the dust. I'm number 5. 4, 3, 2. A funeral. Oh my gosh. The day the guy right ahead of me died, I didn't become better. He just died. You follow? I was the last man standing in that whole process. Oh shoot! I'm sorry. I just crack up at myself all the time. Somebody says, "What do you do for amusement?" I said, "Just look at me." I just laugh, And I tell everybody, "You ought to laugh a lot more at yourself because everyone else is." and I think we probably take ourselves maybe too seriously most of the time. I say this: take God's calling extremely serious, but yourself, lighten up. Lighten up. That's just understand. Everything good about what I've done is because of who He is and what He's done, not because of who I am and what I've done. He gives the increase, and I understand that, and I feel really comfortable in that. In fact, I feel uncomfortable outside of that. So when people want to make me something else, I just want to look and say, no, not really. I think if you're at the head of the class, you're in the wrong class. You always want to. I always want people better than me, and I do. I want people better than me, smarter than me, more effective than me. I'm very comfortable putting myself in environments where I need to learn from other people, and I feel more comfortable there than kind of being the head of the class.
And he's serious when he says that. We were on a Zoom call 3 or 4 weeks ago, and halfway through the conversation, he asked me what was on my back wall behind my desk because there was something with a saying, and you couldn't quite read the whole saying, and you wanted to know what the saying was to see if it was something you needed to write down. And so you're definitely interested in learning and growing.
I wrote it down. It'll be in a book. and I'll give you credit. I won't give you royalties. Just credit.
So what is your view of the just leadership over the next 25, 50 years? And what's your view of young leaders right now? What's your hope? What's your frustration? Are you positive when you think about the future?
Well, I am. Well, first of all, is there anything worse than an old person who thinks they're the last great generation? So I will never go there. I think the next generation can do greater things than what I can. And I hope I'm a pioneer, so I hope they stand on my shoulders, and they do. So I'm very excited about the next generation. We've never had people need leadership more than we do now. We live in a highly dysfunctional culture, and we have very. When I wrote High Road Leadership, my hope for the future is that we become high road leaders, because that is going to bring the change. And my concern for the younger generation is they haven't seen a lot of high road leadership. They've seen an awful lot of low road leadership. They see a lot of transactional leadership, but they have not really seen, they've not seen leaders with values. And that's why internationally we're doing values training in 7 countries where we have over 10% of the population in small groups doing values training. And I mean, I just wish you could go on a transformational trip with me. I mean, I'll go to Argentina next month. I'll sit down with the president. I'll go to Congress. I'll speak to Congress. I'll be with I will be with all the leaders, all the cabinet, the whole works. Listen to me carefully. And one of the things I like about Global Leadership Summit, listen very carefully. 99% of all nonprofit organizations go to the bottom 10% of the culture. And the reason they do that is that's where the low-hanging fruit is. They're very needy, and so they're very receptive. But when you go to the bottom 10% of a culture, understand, my name is John, I'm your friend. You don't get the other 90%. Because history tells you influence has never filtered from the bottom to the top. So why do we spend so much time on very little return? You go to the top 10%, it goes all the way down. So we have been very intentional in going to leaders. And that's what I like about Global. If you invest in Global Leadership Summit, you're investing in people that are doing lead. The hope of the world is good leadership, not just good followership. And so when you're investing in GLS, you're investing in leaders. But sometime I hope you can go on a transformational tour. Sometime you don't even have it. You have no idea. We're teaching values in public schools. 6 million internationally. We started 2 years ago in America. I'm talking about public schools. We just passed our millionth student in public schools, and we're going to 5 million next year. You do understand in 5 years, our organization will be in 50 million students, public students' hands, in the classroom, not before school, not after school, not probably around the flagpole Christian stuff. I'm telling you, that's worthless, folks. It's worthless. When are we going to put our money where the return is for the kingdom? And anyway, enough of that. I'm sorry. I'm starting to get my mojo going here, okay? Next thing I'll be dancing like those guys on stage a while ago.
I would like to see that. That would be good.
Yeah, you don't want to see that. You don't want to see a fat old person dance.
John, thank you. Thank you for your influence on so many of us. Thank you for your influence on the Global Leadership Network.
Okay, wow. One moment that really stayed with me was when David asked John if there was anything he would change about his leadership journey. And John shared that story about failure, about how without those missteps, he wouldn't have learned key lessons along the way. That really hit home for me because if I'm honest, you guys, failure is not my favorite teacher. I usually want the lesson without the discomfort. But leadership doesn't really work that way, does it? Here's something I've learned about myself. I'm a great starter. I am a great starter. I love vision. I love new ideas. I love the energy at the beginning of something. But my growth edge is finishing. Instead of beating myself up about that, I've learned to name it and lead myself with wisdom. I've learned to surround myself with people who are incredible finishers, people who help turn momentum into follow through. That lesson has genuinely made me a better leader. So here's a simple invitation for you, nothing overwhelming. Think about one thing that didn't go the way you hoped, just one thing. And instead of judging yourself, ask, What did I learn? Because chances are that lesson is shaping you more than you realize. And hey, I'm so glad you joined us today. You didn't have to press play, but you did. And that tells me something about you, that you care about growing and you care about leading well. If this conversation encouraged you, share it with someone who's on their own leadership journey. Leadership is better when we do it together. And a huge thank you to our donors who make this podcast possible. Because of their generosity, leaders all over the world get access to conversations like this. If you'd like to be a part of that impact, you can head to globalleadership.org/give. All right, friend, that's it for today. If no one has told you yet today, I want you to know that your leadership matters. Your voice matters and you matter. And as your podcast host and friend, I hope you know this. I believe in you. Keep going and lead right where you are.